Sarah A. Chrisman.
And I'm Gabriel Chrisman.
And today we're discussing Woman's Worth and Worthlessness by Gail Hamilton. This is a really interesting book because Gail Hamilton started out as a suffragist with Susan B. Anthony's crowd. And after working with the suffrage movement for a while, she actually came to the conclusion that it would be the worst thing in the world for women to get the vote. And so she started actively working for the anti-suffrage movement. Now, this book came out in 1871. And I think it's really interesting. It's really important. Mm-hmm. It's a really important book. And part of why I think it's really important is that the anti-suffrage movement that Gail Hamilton was a part of, it has been radically misunderstood and radically misrepresented.
Right, by later feminists. And
later feminists and later historians.
Right.
And before you even come to this book, something that is really important to understand is that the difference between the suffrage movement and the anti-suffrage movement is a question of big government, top-down, controlling every aspect of people's lives. That's what the suffragists believed in. They believed that anything they wanted in life they could vote into being because they could vote the government to impose it on people and control everything.
And because of the reason they wanted women to have the vote was because they thought the government was the end-all, be-all of how everything got done.
And they wanted more government in everyone's lives.
Yes.
And that's why they wanted women to have the vote, because they wanted the government to be everything. Mm-hmm. Anti-suffragists wanted more personal freedom. They wanted more personal responsibility, and they wanted what we would now call a grassroots bottom-up approach. They believed the less government, the better.
And they believed that the more variety of different institutions that provided things to society, the better. That government was only one route of doing things.
Right.
That there should be, and in fact are, multiple other ways of affecting change in society.
Right. And the anti-suffragists, and Gail Hamilton is very much in this camp by the time she wrote this book, they believed you can't legislate morality. That the reason why the suffragists were barking up the wrong tree is that no matter what law you pass, no matter how you try to control people, ultimately there are going to be people who find workarounds and ways to just get around whatever laws you pass. You can't make...
Or ignore them.
Yeah, or ignore them. Mm-hmm. You can't make people moral by dictating to them from the top. That was very much what Gail Hamilton believed. And she believed that if you spend all your time trying to dictate to them from the top, you have no time left to teach them good habits, teach them responsibility, teach them good civic behavior from the bottom up, and that was far more important.
Yeah, and essentially, again, because they invest all their time and energy in paying attention to government, it makes everyone believe, and they believe, that is the only solution and the only thing that needs to be paid attention to. And that, in fact, people's individual behavior was beside the point. And that is definitely something the anti-suffragists disagreed with strongly.
Right. And so this is the book of a strong individualist, and that's what I really love about it. Mm-hmm. I think it's very, very good for that reason, because I do believe in individual responsibility, and I would like to see a lot less government in people's personal lives.
Yes.
And so I'm very much with Gail Hamilton on those things, and a lot of what she says. And another reason this book is really important is that the same people who have misrepresented the anti-suffrage movement have also given a very stereotyped and very off view of what women's relationships to each other were like in the 19th century, how women interacted with each other. And Gail Hamilton, who was living at this time and very much moving within a woman's sphere, gives actual stories and anecdotes about the women she had known and moved within.
And more realistic ones that have less stereotyping and less of a filter.
Right.
A lot later authors, or even more idealistic authors at the time tended to write.
Right. Well, she doesn't pull any punches. She writes about how women actually interact with other women. And so you see the friendships, but you also see the cattiness. You see the women helping each other. You see the women who are stabbing each other in the back, which is very realistic, and it's much more relatable than, a Hollywood stereotype of what, the prim and proper Victorian women was supposedly supposed to be.
Right. I mean, people were people.
People are people.
And women were women, and it was something that was very, if you actually see it unfiltered, it's very familiar to modern audiences.
It's very familiar. It's very familiar. She talks about, the relationship between woman employers and woman employees, and how frustrated the women employers would get with their women employees, and how much the women employees would try to get away with. She talks about how the city girls would refuse to go into the country for any inducement whatsoever. She talks about how the country women were desperate for help. And it's very relatable. It is still going on.
Absolutely.
Today.
Actually, some of the stuff about that you were talking about with women in the workplace and women employers and employees reminded me of a memoir I just read from a woman who was working at Facebook, the most modern setting you can imagine, and just all of the strange interactions between the women bosses and women employees, and just it sounded very much like what you were discussing in here.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And she also talks about the relationships between men and women, and I think it's very important to see what the relationships were actually like, because the women's studies feminists who write about these things, and were writing about them in the 20th century, they would have us all believe that there was some sort of tyranny by the men, and the women were these just little put-upon slaves. But actually, she describes the relationship as, if there's any slavery at all, it's the men who are the slaves of the women. And she says, if there is any serfdom about it, it is far more on the husband's side than on the wife's. There is no slavery so abject as the slavery of a man to the woman he loves. Abject, for it goes behind his will and possesses the whole man. And the more a man he is, the more strong and bright and free, the more thorough is his enthrallment. Woe to such a one if he falls into the hands of a weak, a frivolous, or an unworthy owner. Joy to him if his proprietor be a large-natured woman, for then his completest thrall is his most exalted and divine freedom. In every known sense of the word, a woman owns the man who loves her more than he owns her. And she goes on to say that part of the reason why she doesn't think that women need the vote is because any woman worth her salt, in Gail Hamilton's eyes, can control the way her husband votes. And she is very explicit and pulls no punches when she says that a woman who cannot control her husband's vote does not deserve a vote herself, not because she is a woman, but because she is an idiot. She is very blunt about that.
Yes. Absolutely. Again, she sees the politics and the side of it that is government and voting as basically a sideshow. It's not the whole deal when it comes to society and how a culture operates.
Right, and
it is just a minor element to her once she's understood all of this.
Right, and she also recognized that, taken an equal number of men and women, there are going to be within those two groups an equal percentage of informed and uninformed, educated and uneducated.
Intelligent and unintelligent.
Intelligent and unintelligent. Mm-hmm. And she didn't think that adding an equal number of unintelligent voters to the already large number of unintelligent voters that were voting already was going to solve anything. Hi, Psyche. That's nice. I know you're enjoying that catnip, but...
yeah, here, go over there with it.
But back to Gail Hamilton.
Yes.
She has a wonderful metaphor in here where she compares the state of woman to the state of a marble temple. And I think the way she writes it is utterly beautiful. And she begins by talking about pecuniary responsibility. And Gail Hamilton very much felt that it was the man's job to earn the money and the woman's to spend it.
Yes.
She felt that the women had to be responsible about it, that was part of their sphere, that they need, with great power comes great responsibility, and that they needed to take it seriously, but she did feel that it was up to the women to spend the money and up to the men to make it.
And that they would do a better job of it than the men.
Exactly. And she says, the trouble is that women too often hold the same erroneous opinions as their husbands. They too fancy, or at least admit, that pecuniary dependence involves inferiority of position. Because their husbands earn the money and themselves spend it, because their husbands claim to be the real owners of property and class the wife as a recipient of favor, they let it go so, think it is so, act as if it were so. Thus men walk blindly, led by blind leaders. Just as well might the rough and rocky foundation claim to be superior to the marble temple that rises upon it, stately and beautiful. The foundation supports the temple. The temple does not support the foundation. The foundation is not dependent upon the temple. The temple is dependent upon the foundation. Therefore, the temple is the inferior and subordinate structure. The queen is dependent upon her subjects. The work she does for them is almost as intangible as the ideal woman's work, but nobody considers the queen degraded thereby. It is because she is queen that all her realm pays tribute to her. Would her position be exalted, or would she do more for her kingdom by apprenticing herself to a linen draper? She might indeed earn her wage, but she would have to give up being queen. So Gail Hamilton felt that part of why women shouldn't be working for equality with men was because that would drag women down, because she felt that women were inherently superior to men to begin with. And
in that, she agrees with Robert Heinlein, one of my favorite science fiction authors,
right,
who basically has a quote. I don't remember the exact nature of the quote, but it was something like, "Women, always lose by trying to fight for equality with men
because they're superior."
That women basically, because of just what they are superior to men, and should absolutely, require that be recognized.
Right, and if you try to be superior or if you try to be equal to something you are superior to, it's a losing proposition.
Exactly. Yes.
And so Gail Hamilton was very much of that mindset, and so I think this is a very significant work. Mm-hmm. It's not very well known anymore, which is a shame.
I think that it's because of the women's studies people in the 20th century. It's because of the influence and sort of almost the modern sainthood of suffragists, basically. That now, when it comes to women's history, they only look at the suffragists as far as the sources go, and they ignore the women who disagreed with them, no matter how intelligent and well-argued and everything else.
And she started as a suffragist.
Absolutely.
But she came to the conclusion, after considered thought, that actually that was not the way she wanted society to go.
No, it didn't look, and it's all the things they were advocating for were not going to help, is what she found out.
Again, because she thought that more government was not the answer. She thought that more personal responsibility and more independence and more liberty of thought and action was the answer, and that's what she wanted people to do.
And more diversity of institutions in society, that different situations and different problems required different methods, that everything couldn't be fixed with one tool.
Right.
And the vote is simply one tool for changing society, and government is only one mechanism.
And you can't change people's minds and hearts by dictating to them.
Right. And you can't change them in the way that men created a government. It just doesn't work. Government can't really change people's morals or feelings or anything else. Government has one way of trying to change things, and it is not a terribly effective one.
Right.
And Gail Hamilton ended up deciding that it was more effective and more interesting to pursue different ways of how to influence society. And those different ways came with a lot of the traditional women's roles. The traditional women's roles had evolved as ways to influence society and culture that were outside of government and that worked completely differently than government. And she thought they were a much better answer.
Yeah, and so I definitely think that everyone should check out this book. It's really hard to find now because it's out of print. But if you can at all find it, definitely grab it and encourage other people to read it because, again, it's a really important one, and it's really important to understand this aspect of history. I'm not even going to say woman's history, I'm just going to say history.
Yes.
Because it's history of all of us. And I dislike when people divide up history as it's only women's history.
Right.
It's history. Full stop.
Yeah, and also if you don't read books like this, you can't understand the suffragists.
Mm-hmm.
You can't understand that they were not unopposed.
Right.
And they were not mostly opposed by men.
No. Actually, the symbol of the anti-suffragists was red roses. And so sometimes you'll occasionally come across references in writings of the 19th century about yellow roses and red roses. The yellow roses were the symbol of the suffragists, and more people are aware of that. But the red roses were the anti-suffragists. And I think it's significant that yellow roses symbolize deception in the language of flowers, whereas red roses are true love. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, very interesting stuff. And again, I hope you'll check this out. And I hope you'll check out my books too. A lot of the relationships Gail Hamilton talks about women, employers and employees and friends and such, a lot of those got worked into my Tales of Chetzemoka and the way the women in those books interact with each other. So I hope you'll check out my books too. And we hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a nice thumbs up and happy reading.